Hello and welcome to my video Classic FM Synthesis on the MicroFreak synthesizer. I've previously done a video demonstrating Classic FM synthesis on the Novation Peak, specifically demonstrating how it differs from a traditional FM synth, but how some of those FM sounds can still be achieved. The Arturia MicroFreak is a quite different synthesizer, but it does include some FM capabilities. So what I wanted to do was run through those and demonstrate how some classic FM sounds can be achieved, even though it's a very different synth. So let's get started. First, I'm going to pick the FM algorithm. Note it says 2 operator. What does that mean? It means that the FM engine is based on 2 oscillators. In this case, they're 2 sine wave oscillators. They're connected in a fixed configuration, modulating one another. Specifically, the first oscillator is a carrier, and that means an oscillator you can hear. The second operator is a modulator. That means an oscillator which is used to modulate another oscillator. We have a set of parameters here. I've turned some of them down so you can hear the simplest form. This is a sine wave. The first parameter sets the ratio of frequency of the first operator and the second one. So when I adjust it, nothing happens. Why is this? Because the second parameter, the timbre parameter, is set to 0. This is the amount of frequency modulation. So you can hear adjusting the ratio now has a big timbral impact. The final parameter, the shape parameter, is how much FM feedback, that is self-modulation, the second operator exhibits. So I'm sure you can hear that there's a surprisingly broad range of tones available, and one of the simple ways of using this FM engine is to simply find a timbre that you're happy with and treat the rest of the synthesizer as a standard subtractive synth. But there is more interest that can be extracted here. But there is a complication. Specifically, this is a paraphonic synthesizer. If I wish to play FM sounds only monophonically, then everything works in the way you'd expect. I can use the main envelope, I can use the cycling envelope, and I can use the LFO, and they will behave in the normal way. However, this is a paraphonic synthesizer. What does that mean? In this case, it means that the oscillators can be multiplied into 4 instances of each other, and they will each track the pitch of a note that I play. Notice that as I introduced a key, the additional oscillator started sounding. What does that mean? Well, that means that they're individually gated, but they're not just gated. Let me show you. So you can hear that they actually appear to have a full amplitude envelope each. Now in reality they don't, because there is only one VCA in the synthesizer, but the digital oscillators have the capacity to envelope themselves in a way that matches the VCA. This gives you a feeling of polyphony, but here's the catch. There is actually only one cycling envelope, and there is actually only one LFO. So that means any parameters that I modulate from the oscillators, which are paraphonically played, will only have a single modulation source available to them with respect to cycling envelope and LFO, as opposed to having one each. This can limit us in some ways, but is relatively interesting in its own right. So I'm going to start by just shaping these envelopes into something plucky, because I know I'm going to want something plucky for the type of sound that I'm going to try and make. One of the reasons why I need a plucky sound is that I want to use the LFO as an envelope. The LFO can be tempo synced, and we can adjust whether it re-triggers. So I've turned re-triggering on. That now means every time I press a key, the LFO is going to restart. But let's see what happens if I route the LFO to pitch so we can hear the modulation. Make it a bit faster. The problem is there's no way of making it only repeat once. It's going to keep, firstly it's rising, but secondly it keeps rising over and over again. So how do we avoid this problem? Well, we avoid it by making sure that this envelope is at least as long as the time it takes the decay to occur. So we won't hear the repeat. So let's try and slow it down. Okay, so now we can hear that we can use the LFO as though it were an envelope. How are we going to apply this? Well, there are a number of places we can apply the modulation, but let's first experiment with the parameters that we have. Okay, so to me, what it sounds like we'll be able to do is we'll be able to use one of these envelopes to modulate the timbre and one of them to modulate the shape. I think if we modulate the pitch, the ratio, that's the pitch of oscillator 2, the timbral shift will be a little too aggressive. So let's just try it. Let's send the cycling envelope to the timbre parameter. This is the FM amount. So I think you can hear that we've immediately jumped into the sort of classic FM territory. Let's experiment with the shape a bit. Already sounding pretty interesting. Now let's experiment using the LFO to modulate the shape parameter. I'll assign parameter 1 to the shape parameter, and then so notice when I was turning it up, it was sounding kind of strange. Why? Because this envelope starts low and moves high. So what I have to do is, if I want it to fall, I have to apply it negatively. And in order to have that make sense, I have to increase the parameter that I'm interested in modulating and then apply it backwards. Okay, so I think we already have something quite interesting here. I'm going to experiment with adjusting some of these parameters a little bit. Okay, so I think that sounds pretty good. One of the things that might be interesting is to see if we can use one of the other assignable parameters. So what I can do is I can have the assignable parameter refer to an element in the mod matrix. So in particular, I'm going to have it refer to the routing of the cycling envelope to the timbre parameter. So assignable parameter 2 is now modulating another parameter. So what I'm going to do is go and adjust. First I'm going to turn on a little amplitude velocity mod and turn the pressure mode to velocity. So what that now means is that this press row here corresponds to the velocity of a keystroke. So what I can do then is I can route pressure to that parameter. So now I hope you can hear that there is some additional modulation taking place as I change velocity. So that allows me to add a little more interest to the sound. If I wanted, I could do the same thing to the shape or feedback parameter, but instead I'm thinking I'll add a little bit of filter. So let's just experiment sweeping the filter. And we have this knob which routes the cutoff amount, this amplitude envelope, to the cutoff. I think it would be nice if that was a little velocity sensitive too. So what am I going to do? I'm going to assignable parameter 2 set to the envelope to cutoff modulation. So now, assignable parameter 3 rather. Assignable parameter 3 is envelope to cutoff. So rather than simply having that some flat value, what was the value that I had? 10, I'm going to turn it down to 2. And then I'm going to set this value up to around about 10. Okay, so I think that's about as far as I'm going to take this. I think you'll note that the sound is quite interesting, considering that this is just a dry sound coming straight out of the synthesizer. I think it almost has a feeling of an effect like a reverb being applied to it. I think it has some of that classic sort of classic FM timbre that we're used to hearing, and yet it has that subtractive analog filter character. And even though we've used these envelopes and there's only one instance of each, we can hear a little bit of a re-triggering sound, but because I've used them relatively mildly, the re-triggering sound is not too aggressive, because the dominant movement that we hear is the amplitude envelope and not the filter and not the LFO and not the cycling envelope. So I hope that's given you something of a feel for how this can work. I'll just experiment with the parameters a little bit. Let's try changing to a triangle LFO, add some attack. Try a bandpass maybe. So just a little change of shape of the envelopes, and we've gone into more of a classic FM territory. Let's try and adjust the tuning a bit. So now a very metallic sound, a bit more feedback. And as I've made these sounds a bit more aggressive, you can definitely hear the paraphonic nature, but if I play a block chord, you can hear that because I onset and release the keys at exactly the same time, you don't really notice that it's paraphonic. So we've gone from a sort of key sound, we've got some filter movement, a little change in shape, a little change in timbre, and suddenly we have a FM bandpass pad. And I think this speaks to the flexibility of the MicroFreak. It's an unusual synthesizer. It's probably not my first choice for a beginner synth because of how unusual it is. But it is a synthesizer that I find myself coming back to and find myself using, even though it has various limitations. So, thank you for joining me for this video. I hope you'll come back and watch some more of my videos. I hope this has been useful, and in any case, thank you for watching, and goodbye.